All right, ladies, let's continue with Bill's story, partway down page 8. We'll reread the last paragraph because it's a good one. Trembling, I stepped from the hospital a broken man. Fear sobered me for a bit. Then came the insidious insanity of that first drink, and on Armistice Day, 1934, I was off again. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere or would stumble along to a miserable end. How dark it is before the dawn. In reality, that was to be the beginning of my last debauch. I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. Near the end of that bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen. With a certain satisfaction, I reflected that there was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through that night and the next day. My wife was at work. I wondered whether I dared hide a full bottle of gin near the head of our bed. I would need it before daylight. My musing was interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice of an old friend asked if he might come over. He was sober. It was years since I could remember his coming to New York in that condition. I was amazed. Rumor had it that he had been committed for alcoholic insanity. I wondered how he had escaped. Of course he would have dinner, and then I could drink openly with him. Unmindful of his welfare, I thought only of recapturing the spirit of other days. There was that time we had chartered an airplane to complete a jag. His coming was an oasis in this dreary desert of futility. The very thing. An oasis. Drinkers are like that. So I'm going to stop there and talk about that first before we move on. So the person that phoned, his name is Ebby Thatcher. And so he was a friend of Bill's, and they used to caroom around and do these jags. I imagine it's like a bachelor party, and they show up places and do all sorts of random things. And so he's calling him, and Bill's like, he was sober. And as you can see in the type there, it's in italics, so that's a big exclamation mark. Like, he was sober. Wow. And it says that there was a rumor he had been committed for alcoholic insanity, and Bill doesn't think anything other than the fact that he must have escaped. There's no possible way they let him out. He's got to have escaped, and here he comes, and I'm so excited. Like, we're going to get on like old times. Dottie's got her hand up. What are you going to add, Dottie? Dottie, you're not...
Where it says, try that again, Dottie alcoholic. So back on page 8, the second to last paragraph, it says, near the end of the bleak November, I was sitting in my kitchen. So there, that was on November 11th, and Bill, he was on a relapse there, and that relapse lasted 3 weeks, and it was just by some miracle that Ebby happened to call. And Bill and Ebby, they go back to way back when they were childhood friends, and they used to spend their summers together in Vermont, because Ebby was from upstate New York and Bill was originally from Vermont. And so he was just being really, really selfish, thinking that he can drink in front of his sober friend and all the craziness that goes with it. So that, again, was more of his unmanageability that was starting to occur in Bill's life as he was drinking more and more. That's all I have on that section.
Thank you, Dottie. Anybody else wanted to speak on that section? Leslie P., go ahead.
Well, I was just reading for hi, Leslie P. from Alcoholic from Cogston. So Armistice Day, he's drinking. He's making sure that he's got a bottle of gin somewhere, maybe at the head of his bed or somewhere in the kitchen that he's hiding it. And then he gets this cheery voice. So it kind of says to me that he's half in the bag at that point. And then he gets this cheery voice, and he says, the guy is sober. It's just interesting to me that he actually even recognized, being half whacked, that he even recognized that the guy's sober. That's just what I was thinking.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it jumped out at him too. He's like, he was sober.
Yeah.
Yeah. Vanessa, what would you like to add?
I'm Vanessa. I'm an alcoholic. I just wanted to add about Ebby. So they were childhood friends, and Ebby's family had actually sent him away. They didn't really know where he had went, but Ebby's dad was a politician and was running for, I don't know what position he was running for, but he wanted Ebby away from the family because he was out doing crazy alcoholic things. So they kind of had left him and hid him away. That's all I'll say right now. There's more of what happened with Ebby to put him in the condition that he's visiting Bill now, but thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Physical hands. Yeah, Tina, I see you. Go ahead.
Hi, Tina from California, alcoholic. It just speaks to the obsession and the selfishness of our disease. I'm sure Bill's has a heart of gold, and I'm sure none of us would ever want to put any of our best friends in harm's way. But when we're in it, when we're in our disease and practicing our alcoholism, we have no thought or consideration, even to our very, very best friend, their condition or their well-being. It's all about me, what I want now. That's our alcoholism, and we've all been there. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much. All right, Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz. I'm an alcoholic. I'm from Boston, and what I wanted to comment on was the last sentence where Bill says his coming was an oasis in this dreary desert of futility, the very thing, and so what I wanted to comment on was here in his story, he's saying that the very fact that that Ebby is coming and he's going to be able to sit and reminisce and all about the good old days of drinking, and he gets to drink during this time, and that's the way he's talking about it. Well, outside of our central service in Boston, right at the door, there's they've set up a whole bunch of plants and a couple of chairs with a table and a big book on the table, and somebody made a sign and they put it right on the plants, and it says the very thing, an oasis. And I just wanted to comment because it's like in the book, Bill's talking about the drinking days and everything as an oasis, but we turned it around, and the very thing, AA and Central Service and all the books and everything, that's our oasis now. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Amanda.
Hi everyone, Amanda, alcoholic. Two things that I was thinking. So this part where, Bill knows Ebby is sober. I like to point out to my sponsees, when they're struggling with other friends that want them to drink, as a drinker, we don't, of course, we don't really care about other people, and what they think, but we want other people to drink with us so that we can feel better. And I think, I love that Bill has this plan to get him to drink, even though he knows he's sober, he just doesn't care. And so this is the part where I point out to my sponsees, when you have those friends that just don't really get it and they just aren't mindful of it, of course they want you to partake in this thing, so that they can feel better. Because that's what I did, so I could feel better. And the other part, fear sobered me up for a bit. That was my story when I came in here. I ran on fear for several months before I got a sponsor and did the steps. And then it says the insidious insanity of that first drink, that I was insane. I was insane until I did steps. My emotional sobriety, the obsession to drink, was not lifted until I moved through the steps. And I was just reflecting how funny it is now. Like, fear is what drives me to drink. There's no way it's going to keep me sober now. You know, like, fear destroys me. So yeah, that's all I have. Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much. Valerie.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm Valerie, alcoholic from Vancouver, BC, and I just this positive stuff popped out at me. How dark it is before the dawn! Exclamation point. And I think for me, when it got really dark, I knew that I had to make a change. You know, so we have to have a darkness to let that crack of light come in. And then it says, I wish to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. And that makes me almost just want to cry, because for anybody that's new, it gets dark and it gets hard, but boy, it just, over the years, it just, weeks, days, it gets so much better, so much better. And so I'm so glad that he was aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Connie M.
Hi there. Good morning. I'm Connie, and I'm an alcoholic. Thanks so much for having this book today. I can't tell you how excited I am to start from the beginning. What people brought is that, of course, we would have dinner, and then I could drink openly with him. Like, this at ease and comfort of, well, everything's fine, but I need to add a little bit more. I call it that gear, that little gear fitting in. Like, everything's good, but here, let's add a little alcohol, and then the emotions and the fun can begin. And I remember early and trying to decide not to drink, and before I started the steps and stuff, and going, and the scariness of not drinking when you're still living in the midst of other people that are your friends and your lifestyle. How do you change that completely? And so I went to a gathering, and a friend I used to drink with, and we had so much fun, but she didn't see the other side of it. And I remember her, and I was so scared, like, coming up with my no. And she came up, she goes, so I hear you're not drinking. Are you sure? You know what? Come on. Like, that whole, like, come on, like, join me. Like, and that's what I see of him, is like, come on, join me. I'll let you talk. I'm sure you're sober. Oh, it's good. Come join me. And knowing that scaredness and saying no, and that those motions and thoughts just were like so scary. But when I read further in the book more about alcoholism, and it talks about when we begin to drink deliberately instead of casually, there's serious effective thought during that premeditation. So I have to really be mindful of what I'm doing with my body, whether I'm holding somebody's beer or wine, or whether I have my keys to my own cars. I still have to be really mindful, because that ease and comfort, like, this is fine, but I'm sure we can add some more to it. I mean, here he's in his home, he's having coffee with a friend, but he can't wait for that drink, that ease and comfort that speaks beyond my emotions and ideas. So anyways, thanks for being here. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Karen P.
I'm not unmuted. Can
Yep.
you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I was just wondering, I'm new to all this, but, like, he was trying to hide gin bottles and making sure he had enough for the night, and he mentioned that his wife was at work. Well, if his friend was coming over, he was thinking in his mind, the way I think about it is, oh boy, if he comes over, and my wife, even if she was to come home from work, of course, if they're going to have dinner together, I'm sure he ain't cooking. So he was thinking, oh boy, if my friend's over, I can drink openly now. My wife ain't going to say nothing in front of my friend, and it was like an oasis to him. It's like probably walking through the desert and seeing that big pool of water. Oh boy, is that what he's talking about? Even now his friend's not drinking, so what excuse is he going to use? Because when he passes the friend to drink, and he refuses it, and yet he continues to drink in front of him. So no matter what, it was a win-win for him, because the wife would be there, and now she's not going to say anything, because what other reason would he have to try to hide a bottle of gin behind the headboard? He was only hiding it from his wife, right? Is that what was going on? Because I could see that. I could see my friend Jen coming over, and here I am, my husband thinking I'm quitting drinking, but Jen came over and she's my drinking buddy, so now I've got that reason to pull out any, matter of fact, I don't even have to say I had the booze. He brought it with him, and she would probably cover for me just because she's my good friend. So I'm sure he was like in an oasis.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, that's all I had to say on that subject.
Perfect. And
Thank
you're
you.
bang on. Absolutely. And yeah, it's 1934. Lois was definitely going to be cooking him dinner that night for sure. Yeah. Jeanette. Whoops. Oh, there you go.
You know, what popped out at me, the unmindful of his welfare. How many times have we heard, oh, come on, let's have one for the good old days? And, you know, he thought the selfishness only, it was him thinking of recapturing his, you know, the spirit of other days. And the bottom line is misery loves company. So that's all I have to share.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We'll do one more and then we'll move on. Joanne.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joanne. I'm an alcoholic addict. The miracle, one of the miracles and gifts that I see in what we just read was the two statements of he was sober and I was amazed. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as that. It's when we do 12-step calls, you know, it's the idea of we're sober and we have found an answer. And for him, he didn't have an answer. I mean, up until that point, he didn't have an answer. And after that line, he still doesn't have an answer. But what he does have is a little bit of an amazement that someone that he knew in an intimate way was able to be sober, and it was baffling to him. And so there was the first seed that was planted. That's it.
Thank you so much. And a good point from the chat that I just wanted to read. It says, the first time I read this, I thought that I wondered how he escaped was referring to how he escaped from insanity of alcoholism. But Bill didn't care how he got sober. He was concerned about how he got out of the institution, which is completely true. I also want to point out for those who maybe missed it that, you know, it does say Bill is drinking at this point when Ebby is coming over. Bill is not sober when he's first hearing this message. So some people need to hear that is the case, that Bill is drinking when Ebby is bringing him this information. All right, we're going to move on. The door opened, and he stood there, fresh-skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? I pushed a drink across the table. He refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered what had got into the fellow. He wasn't himself. Come on, what's this all about? I queried. He looked straight at me. Simply but smilingly, he said, I've got religion. I was aghast. So that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now, I suspected, a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire, all right. But bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told about how two men had appeared in court, persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. All right, so we'll stop right there and go over those couple of chapters. So obviously the door opens and Ebby's standing there, and he is not the same person Bill had seen. He is completely reorganized exterior. So he's got a starry-eyed look. He just looked completely different. Bill was aghast. And he says, what is going on? As he pushed the drink and he doesn't take it. And he's like, I got religion. And Bill's like, oh yeah, here we go. Let him talk. He's like, you know, I'm good. This is going to be good, but not for me. And then so Ebby starts telling him about how these two men came to court, and the two men were from the Oxford group. And they convinced the judge to let them try this program with him. Dottie?
Dottie alcoholic. So the two men were Roland Hazard and Sieber Grace, and as Kim said, they were from the Oxford group, and they took Ebby from his bad behaviors he was doing in Vermont at the time, while under the influence of alcohol. And so Ebby continued to tell Bill about all what's going on. And, they had told of a simple religious idea, and that was the start of step 2 for Bill. And then it was a practical program of action, which were the remaining steps that Bill came up with, which is step 3 through 12. And then, at the bottom, it was self-evident, it worked. So this is where Bill, now he's starting to see the problem, right, which he got from Dr. Silkworth. He found it was a simple solution, religion, which he got from Ebby. And he also it was a practical program of action, which he also, he learned from Ebby. And at this time, we're going to start to hear it. Bill started to grow a resentment towards Ebby because of the religious part of his spirituality. Tongue twister there. So yeah, it was just, it was amazing that like Bill learned this stuff while under the influence. It was like Ebby and Dr. Silkworth, they had now planted that small mustard seed and got Bill thinking while he was in his grips of drinking his gin. So that's all I have on that.
Thank you, Dottie. Jenny D.
Hey, hi, I'm Jenny. I'm an alcoholic. I love that Ebby had 2 months when he came here, because when he came to see Bill, sort of nowadays 2 months doesn't seem like a lot because there's so many people with years and years and years. When I first got sober, I went. An old timer asked me to come and do a 12-step poll with her. You did a lot more then of going to people's houses. 2 women would always go see another woman, big book in hand. I had 18 days. And I said to her, I don't know anything. I don't know anything. I've been here 18 days. What the hell am I going to say that's going to mean anything? And I'm getting emotional. She said, Jenny, tell her you have 18 days. That's going to, without alcohol, is going to mean more to her than anything else here. Because to a drunk, I know if I looked at somebody with that much time, I went, how the hell did they do that? If I looked at somebody with 20 years, I just went, yeah, no. But 18 days seemed a bit doable. So that's why he shared that message with 2 months of sobriety. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, and how many times have we heard a newcomer, I only have 7 days? It's like, no, you've got 7 days. Imagine the person with 1 day. Like, you've got 6 on top of their 1. Like, it's so important. We don't just have our time. Susan T.
Hi, I'm Susan. I'm an alcoholic. Morning, ladies. Awesome to see you. And the story that was told to me was Ebby's mom, I think it was, she was a mayor of the town, and Ebby was a big disgrace, right, to his family. So they sent him away to their home cottage kind of place out in the country or wherever it was, and to he was embarrassing them, right? And so anyway, one day they got special projects for him to do. So Ebby's painting his house, and these pigeons were flying by, and they were pooping on the house when he was painting them. So he went out and he got a shotgun, and he started shooting these birds that were pooping on his painting on the house. So that's when he was taken away by his family and put away. Doesn't that sound familiar? Mr. No. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. Oh, yeah. Sounds pretty accurate. Megan.
Hi, everybody. I'm Megan. I'm an alcoholic. Really quick with this Ebby thing. Ebby's got religion. So he's introducing Bill to the first part of the steps, first, second, and third. And a lot of these were based off, most of our steps were based off the Oxford principles at first. And unfortunately, it's not all about religion. And that's what ended up happening to Ebby. He just had religion. And like I said at one of the other meetings, if it was all about religion, then nuns and priests and rabbis and so forth would not be alcoholics if that's all it was all about. So Ebby ended up relapsing, unfortunately, and he kept coming, relapsing and relapsing for years, in and out, and eventually he did die sober, but he died from emphysema. So this is like just goes to show you, how it's not all about the religious aspect, that it's important to go through the steps. But to me, it's like, well, Bill's higher power, like, talked through Ebby and got him started with this. So that I thought that was very interesting information that I read up on. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Karen P.
Yeah, I'm Karen Alcoholic. So when I looked at this, I said, let's see, when he said he had religion, and he was aghast. I mean, today we would think, maybe he was thinking, oh God, here he goes. He's a guy probably went into some religious cult or something, and he was thinking, oh well, that's just great. I got my gin, and he ain't going to be drinking it. That's good for me. More for me. That's the thought in his mind. Oh, I'll just let him rant on while I drink my gin. And then the more he had talked, the more that he was like, oh, wait a minute, this seems like this is working for him. So, but I can just picture myself with someone coming over and saying they got religion. Immediately my brain would go, oh boy, somebody's got a hold of him, and putting crap in his head. He thinks he's going to push it on me. Well, go ahead. I'll just drink my way through that. You can just talk, So that's what I seen there with that. But, he said he didn't do any ranting. So in other words, he wasn't going to push that religion on him. He just said that's what he had. And then he just, kind of just told him about how people came and to the court or to the judge and they suspended his commitment. And then they just told him about the religious idea. And that was like 2 months ago. And he's thinking to himself, wow, and it worked. Eddie's telling him it worked. And that leaves him, Bill, that put that little seed of thought in Bill's mind. So and that's what I think. Is that what that means in that area right there?
Thank you so much, Karen. Last one, Laura C.
Hi, I'm Laura. I'm an alcoholic. I've read this so many times, and yet here it is, brand new. As I'm looking at this and reading this, what I'm really seeing, and I'm seeing him so beautifully described, is exactly what happened to me when I walked into the rooms for the first time. And I saw all your shiny, happy, fresh, smiling faces. And there was something different about you guys. You were telling a story that I got, and I'm looking in the eyes of people that are okay. And that's what I see him kind of describing here. And that idea that was eventually to become attraction rather than promotion. Had Ebby said, hey, here's what you need to do, you drunk, it wouldn't have worked. And it wouldn't have worked on me either, So to just simply hear your stories and to just be able to see that recovery, that is the most powerful, amazing thing. And I don't think noticed before that in these few simple paragraphs, he describes that beautifully. So that's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you so much. All right, let's keep going. Bottom of 9. He had come to pass his experience along to me, if I cared to have it. I was shocked, but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. He talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat on still Sundays, way over there on the hillside. There was that proffered Temperance Pledge I had never signed. My grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folk and their doings. His insistence that the spheres really had their music, but his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen. His fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he died. These recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard. That wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back again. I had always believed in a power greater than myself, I had often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are, for that means blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, suggested vast laws and forces at work. Despite contrary indications, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay all. How could there be so much precise and immutable law and no intelligence? I simply had to believe in a spirit of the universe, who knew neither time nor limitation, but that was as far as I had gone. With ministers and the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of a God personal to me, who was love, superhuman strength, and direction, I became irritated, and my mind snapped shut against such a theory. So this page is lovely. So I love how he is just starting to recall all of these things from his childhood, and he's kind of taken us on that journey through his journey with God, right? He grew up, and it shows that he did have some religion when he was a child, as a lot of us have had, but then certain things come up, and we turn away from the church. And I always like to add in there the proffered Temperance Pledge. My grandmother was a member of the Sons of Temperance, and my mother has signed a Temperance Pledge, but there was no alcoholism in our family until me, of course. So a Temperance Pledge is just a pledge that you're going to abstain from alcohol, and that was good for the moderate drinker back then. So leads me to believe there was a little bit more alcoholism in my family than was let on. But I always like to share that story. And then he talks about like the scientific part of it, and that theory of the wicked had to have come from somewhere. Where is this thing before? And my favorite part on the page is when he talks about a God personal to me who was love, superhuman strength, and direction. Like, that's my God, and that's the God that I hope you all can find. Anyone want to share on this page? Let me look for physical hands up. There's no hands up. Dottie, thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, Dottie, alcoholic. Bill had his thing with God, and he got that from his grandfather, right? Bill was raised by his grandfather from the age of 12, and his grandfather believed in something that was greater than himself, but nobody was to tell him that it was a God or what and who he was to believe in, and that's how Bill believed it too. So Bill and religion, they just, they weren't friends. There was something there, but he just didn't know what it was. And this is where he started taking on step 2 before step 2 was to be. And Bill, at the last paragraph where they're talking about the ministers and all the world's religions, Bill stood strong to his reservation of who he was going to trust. He wanted to be able to trust the God of his own understanding versus theology, because he was just, he didn't want to be told who and what to believe in. So I just find it, amazing how all of a sudden it's all working in, like Kim said, into the spiritual part of it. And, step 2 is starting to come alive now in Bill's story. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Dottie. Grace?
Yeah, hi, I'm Grace. I'm an alcoholic. There were two sections. On the very top, where it talked about he was interested, he had to be, or I was hopeless. And I mean, I think we all can get to understand how we got to that point. It might have taken different little things that were involved in our lives, but we all had to get to that before we could even begin to do a first step, before we could even begin to say yes to anything that somebody suggested for us. Was, that total feeling of hopelessness. The other thing was down on the lower part. How could there be so much of a precise and immutable law and no intelligence? I simply had to believe in the spirit of the universe, who knew neither time nor limitation, but that was as far as I had gone. And I think that's pretty far. I mean, I think that was some pretty
deep and thoughtful ideas was how he came to that point. To know there was something that drove things forward, something that kept things in some sort of a rhythm. So I think he had the beginnings of that right then. And he talked about a God personal to me who was love. He might not at that moment been able to use those names, but for me, just reading that paragraph showed that he did have a knowledge of a power greater than himself, and just had to begin to develop it more so that it worked for him as he went through the first 3 steps. That's all I have.
Thank you, Grace. Tina, I saw your hand up.
Yes, Tina Alcoholic. The last paragraph when he says, with ministers and the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of a God personal to me who was love, superhuman strength and direction, I became irritated and my mind snapped shut against such a theory. Right there, step 2. I mean, if it wasn't for Bill's influence, this program would not be as successful as it is. His influence is pivotal in representing I can't say the majority of the world, but a huge percentage of people who believe along these lines. And if this wasn't reflected in the steps and in the traditions as it is, then I truly believe that Alcoholics Anonymous would not be as the success that it is today, and that it will continue to be because of it. So that's just my take.
Right, and I think it leads to the point where it says, my mind snapped shut against such a theory, as to why he's made this such a spiritual program as opposed to a religious program, because he knew if it was a religious program, everyone else like him would snap their mind shut. And so to make it spiritual, it would be more inclusive for more people and easier to accept God. Megan M.
Hi, everybody. Megan Alcoholic. This one, my God, I love reading this about, my higher power, and it's like, the childhood memories rose before me. And like, for me, I can understand that, in the Catholic religion, you're brought up, like, if you sin, you're going to, go to hell and all this stuff. It was very like, it was just like more of a punishing God, which I didn't believe in. From what I understand today, my higher power is all forgiving, and as long as we try to make up for that, I feel like, you're moving towards the right direction. And, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay it all, and I feel that way today. But I'll tell you, when I was in the depths of drinking and when I was in that misery and that self-pity and stuff like that, I believe that it was all black when we die. And like, what a miserable way to live and to think. Like that just showed me, like, even though I did have an idea that something was out there, when I was drinking and when I got to like my bottom, I really believed that it was just all black and that there was no purpose for us being here and that it was just nothing. And it was just a miserable way to live. And I'll tell you, I'm definitely did a 180 on that. And I don't believe that today in any way. I honestly believe our path is laid out for us before we even know it. And that's what, is very exciting for me. And I've realized that, being selfless and helping another is what gets me closer to that path that I'm supposed to be on. And, I have my sponsees actually do a little exercise, when they first go to step 2. I have them like write down all the characteristics that they would want their higher power to have. And this is like an amazing journey to me. I feel like this is one of my favorite journeys, is finding, getting to that and finding what that's all about. So that's all I have to share. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Megan. Leslie P., I saw your hand was up. Did you want to speak?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Leslie Alcoholic. I like what Grace had said, where I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. And here's a guy who's drinking bathtub gin. His friends come over, and he's getting into the sauce, but he still knew that he was hopeless. And he goes on, so he's recalling those memories, those childhood memories, and then his grandfather, trying to always steer him in the right direction. But this guy, I find Bill is a very intelligent guy. He goes for the, my intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even evolutionists suggested vast laws and forces at work. And I think I always think back on Bill being in the 30s, when this is all taking place, and before or just before World War II, the Depression, the Dust Bowl. I mean, there was just horrible stuff happening throughout the world, unlike what's happening now with coronavirus. I mean, just that, I just threw that in there. But he's he's still thinking about that God who I simply had to believe. I had to have faith and believe in the spirit of the universe, who knew neither time nor limitations, and all of God's power. That spirit. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you, Leslie. Vanessa.
Vanessa, alcoholic. I really relate to where the bottom where he talks about becoming irritated and his mind snapping shut against such a theory. But yeah, I think Dottie said that when he was 12, his grandfather took over care of him, and his parents had went through a really bad divorce, and his dad had left and his mom had left. And when with his mind snapping shut, it feels like when I first came in, any little bit of hope, my mind would snap shut against that too, because there just been so much disappointment in the years leading up to coming into the program that it almost hurt to think that maybe that would end, or that there was an answer to that. So I think when he says, let's talk about the key to willingness and how we can open the door a little bit and always open it a little bit more. Maybe that's a little bit more safe. It felt more safe to me when I came in, just having a little bit of that to work with, because of all of the disappointment that had happened before that. Thanks.
Thank you. Connie.
Hi there. My name's Connie. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks for being here again. I'm an all or none person. All or none. There's not this gray area. And so here where it talks about my intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, those are all the people that are giving me information. And growing up, I was raised with Catholicism and a big family. So there's the chaos, there's alcohol, all that. And I can say my parents did the best they could. But even with my mom and dad, my mom was Catholic but didn't participate. My dad was Protestant, didn't participate. But they encouraged us to find that, But there's still that limited thinking that humanness has, we don't have that. And so I would I either had to be right or wrong, so I was constantly on a religious search. I tried one church and I stopped drinking, and I wore dresses, and I went to Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, dragged my kids, and I could do that for a limited time because I wasn't drinking and I was trying to do this, trying to believe, and then I'd fail that, and then I'd go back to Catholicism. I'd work with that, and just always looking for that religious, spiritual aspect. And when somebody came to the area who happened to be a priest who talked about his alcoholism, I connected, and I could go to that person knowing that I was on a spiritual quest, but he would keep directing me to do you think you have a problem with the drinking? Because it would be the same problems, and I'd be talking to him about the rights and wrongs of it. And he'd be talking about, and I can thankfully say that those people, those intellects, those astronomers, those business, they're not on the outside of the circle. I was able to, with this statement, spirit of the universe, I was able to put them inside, and I'm in there, and we're all just on this search. And for me, it makes it an easier, softer path. It's not right and wrong. and the alcoholism is sickness and illness, and I'm here for health, and that doesn't mean I'll always do it right. And so I love that openness and the vastness and the depth and weight of the program that it offers us to dive into. So thank you. Thanks
Thanks
for being here.
Thank you,
Let me smile.
All righty. Marianne.
Hi, friends. I am an alcoholic member of Golden Mile Group. My name's Marianne. What hooks me every time I read this is that I had enough gin concealed around to be able to endure anything. That hooks me every time. Even if I could remember where I had placed it, because I probably hid it and couldn't remember it. But if this guy he acted like that, like I do, and he has a solution for me to not have to have, because I never had enough, then I want to know what comes next. So I love that on me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marianne. Lois.
Yeah, I love this single sentence here. It's not even a paragraph. It says that wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back again. And if you go back to the beginning of Bill's story, he read that tombstone, and at the bottom of the writing, he says, ominous warning, which he failed to heed. And it just, he writes, and then he brings you back to something. It's just poignant the way he can do things like that. He'll make you look at something and then bring you back to the beginning. So, he's just going to show you that he had found liquor then, but he wasn't ready to heed any warnings about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Lois. Charlene.
Hi, Charlene, alcoholic. This is a very beautiful page, and I just love how he begins with he was hopeless. So basically, when you're hopeless, you're going to try anything. And he begins to reminisce, and it kind of reminds me of like a newcomer, or even when I came into the room for the first time, and people started sharing with me, and I was like, oh my God, like thinking of my past and thinking of everything, and it just reminded me of a raw, honest share that he's technically doing here. And then the part where he talks about few people are atheists, and what that means, is that it's a strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. I remember time and time again when I used to say, who cares? What does it matter? It doesn't matter. So I'm going to drink. And it always brought me back to drinking, because I didn't want to acknowledge or believe that my higher power could ever help me. I knew that I wasn't an atheist, but I knew that if I pushed that part of my life away, then I could always have an excuse and always have a reason to drink. And at the end, when he says, the God being love, superhuman strength, and direction, oh, that's just so beautiful, because our God, and someone had said it, the God of our understanding can be anything that we, want him to be. Like, for me, it's love and understanding and all these just incredible attributes, that I want. And I find that in my sponsor, but I also find that more so in my higher power, which is just an incredible strength that we have, and again, reading this for the first time is just making me emotional and making me think, wow, like I'm never alone. So thank you.
Thank you so much. One more. Heidi G.
Hi, Heidi, alcoholic. I had nothing highlighted on this page, and now I have it all sorts of marked up. The part where he's talking about his grandfather just really had me thinking. I ended up writing kind of where Bill got his idea of religion and spirituality, and then where is mine from? And I feel like this kind of brings a lot of attention to how much we've adopted our sense of God or religion or whatever from the people around us as we are raised and grow, and how many of those things, like, I believe really strongly, but really, like, where did I get that idea? And kind of having that backflash to my experience and seeing that he's so, profound in such a small paragraph, as to, you know, where they made me swallow hard, like how it actually made him physically react to these things based on kind of what he got from his grandfather. So that's all I have to share.
Thank you. And one more thing before we read the next page is I always like to point out to people who maybe struggle with the word God is, you know, there's a lot in this chapter of training wheel words that we can use for God. And one of those training wheel words is spirit of the universe. So if someone doesn't like the God word, they can use the training wheel version of spirit of the universe. And there's a few more that are going to come up as well. So let's carry on and do our last page for today, page 11. Oh, I wish we could read the whole thing. I just love it so much. To Christ I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. His moral teaching most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. The wars which had been fought, the burnings and chicanery that religious dispute had facilitated made me sick. I honestly doubted whether, on balance, the religions of mankind had done any good. Judging from what I had seen in Europe and since, the power of God in human affairs was negligible. The brotherhood of man a grim jest. If there was a devil, he seemed the boss universal, and he certainly had me. But my friend sat before me, and he made the point-blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. Then he had, in effect, been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. Had this power originated in him? Obviously it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that minute, and this was none at all. That floored me. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. Here was something at work in a human heart which had done the impossible. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. Never mind the musty past. Here sat a miracle directly across the kitchen table. He shouted great tidings. Goosebumps. Like, what a great page. So much on this page. For me, the top part is a bit about Christ, about Jesus. A lot of people in religion have said, have you found Jesus? And I could never piece that bit together. I was like, okay, I can understand the God part, not the Jesus part. But here it explains that, Jesus is a teacher, a moral teacher. Walk in his path and you can walk in the light of God. I can understand that grasp. The wars had been fought, what he had seen when he was at war. Remember, he was a soldier in war, and so he had seen a lot of terrible things, and he thought, how could there be a God if all of these calamities happen? And not only that, a lot of these wars of back then were fought in religious names, and it's like, meanwhile, it's a struggle for power and greed and all of that darkness of man. And then he talks about this miracle. His friend sits before him at the table. He was hopeless, just like me. But look at this change, like goosebumps all over as he talks about that. And then he's here shouting great tidings. Like, he's so enthused about what has happened to him in these 2 months. He's exuberant about sharing it with his friend. Who would like to go on this page? There's no way there's no hands up on this page. Tina.
It's very short and quick. For me, this page speaks to open-mindedness. This is where the essence of open-mindedness begins. And it just screams it. And that's all I heard is, I came from here, I was here, and now I'm here.
Yeah.
And like a complete 180 or 360. That's inspirational. I loved this page. Thank you so much for doing one more. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so it screams to me hope And hope brings the willingness, and willingness brings that open-mindedness. Like big words on the top of my page. Absolutely. Marianne?
Right. What it does for me is it's just how negative my thinking was. And after I did these steps and continue to do these steps, and positive my thinking gets to, because I can still look at the negative, and it just takes me down a bad path. But if I can, when I work these steps in my life and get to positive thinking, things look a lot better. Thank you.
Thank you. Connie M.
Sorry to keep cheering. My name's Connie. I'm an alcoholic. The sentence, his human will had failed. And the person who kept directing me, like I say, to AA until I got there, he kept telling me, you got to try to trust without understanding. And again, it's that all or none thinking. Like I have my old ideas, and that my human will. I love the 3 pertinent ideas. They were the simplest thing I could remember when I was first sober. I couldn't remember the steps or any of the prayers, but the 3 pertinent ideas, and that his human will had failed. And part of that is that trust without understanding. And I still have to do that today. Like I still put my old ideas out there, and I still have my thinking, and I have to take that breath to go, open me up, help me to know that just because I don't understand that I can't trust this, that this takes time. And for me, that's soothing, because it's not, I don't have the drink to relieve that and take me away from the problems of the world. I have to live in it. And that breath of life, that, what was it? The spirit of the universe, the music of the spheres, all these, I love what you said, like these are the things that ease us into this way of thinking, because my thinking is so all or none. Still, it can be. I mean, there's so much gray in that, and I love gray. But when I say I love gray, I want black and white. So I'm that human entity that changes all the time. I'm that actor. If you just stand here, no, move over a little bit. If that light, I want to run everything, and I got to trust without understanding that it's being run without me, and it's probably better, and I'll sleep better. So thanks again for this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Lois?
Yes, I just wanted to point out that Bill had really known Ebby very well, and he knew how bad he was. And to see him in this way, it brings out that depth and weight that we have to get through to another alcoholic. We have to share some of our story and tell them how bad we were and how this particular program lifted us up out of that despair that we were in. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lois. Grace?
Yeah, hi. Yes, I wanted to just make a comment. I hope I can be clear about this. When he says God had done for him what he could not do for himself, his human will had failed. We've all experienced that when he admitted complete defeat. Then you go down just a little bit, and it says, had this power originated in him? Obviously, it had not. But if you skip down just a slight bit, he says, here was something at work in a human heart which had done the impossible. So my thinking is that, yes, in fact, that power originated in him. It originated in me, in my heart. What I believe is that when we get to that point of total desperation, as he talks about himself, that's when, for that moment sometimes, is when that heart of ours or that God within opens up. And sometimes if we don't take that opportunity at that moment to ask for that help or to even see it, then sometimes it closes back down. That's kind of my thinking, that, you have to get to that point he talks about, of that total desperation, before you can even allow and recognize that there is that God within that can do more for you than you could do alone. That's all I got.
Thank you so much, Grace. Yeah, and anyone else want to share on this page before we close out physical hands? Let's do a quick scan. No. No, I just love that last line where he's shouting the great tidings, because as a person who's experienced it, like I shout these great tidings because I feel like Abby, like it's happened for me and I want to share it, and it's so absolutely amazing. And I'm so happy we're ending today on a top of hope